All right. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today about overcoming math anxiety in early elementary classrooms. So math anxiety is actually a documented phobia that is actually inherent to American culture. And we often pass our mathematics aversion to our children in our homes and our classrooms early in their development. So before we jump into the webinar and hand it over to our guest speaker, Gloria Liu, we're going to tell you a little bit about Paige and Paxton so you can understand why exactly we're doing this. So Paige and Paxton expose young minds to STEM at the early age. And why we focus on such an early age is because we know that early on, early on in education is where a lot of those foundational elements are. That's where a lot of the confidence is built in terms of students' ability to feel that they can learn and tackle difficult subjects. And that's what Paige and Paxton do. They're really focused on getting kids hooked on STEM early and often. And the reason why we hold these webinars is really to help you guys who are focused on early childhood education to gain direct access to experts and leaders who are focused on the early STEM pipeline. All right. So our speaker, Gloria Liu, is actually the coordinator and co-director for the Center for Promoting STEM at Oakton Community College. And Gloria has a master's in math education from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And while supervising math and science tutoring at the Learning Center at Oakton, she co-authored 3 proposals that allowed Oakton to land 2 pretty significant National Science Foundation Talent Expansion Program grants, totaling more than $1.8 million. She also runs the Oakton Center for Promoting STEM, where she organizes research projects for STEM students.
Let's get started. Thanks for answering those questions. It helps for me to understand who I'm talking to. If we can go to the next slide, we'll first speak about the definition. What do we mean when we say math anxiety? And usually we think about it as some kind of feeling. According to Ashcraft, it's a feeling of tension, apprehension, or fear that interferes with performance. And we often think about maybe sweaty palms or faster heartbeat and not being able to focus and concentrate on the problem or number in front of us. Sometimes for some individuals, simply seeing numbers solicit some of those kinds of physical symptoms. There is a medical researcher, Dr. Vinod Menon of Stanford University. He published a report in 2012, so it's quite recent, where they examined the brain activities of second and third graders using the MRI. And Dr. Menon found that among the students with math anxiety, the part of the brain that is most active when they are presented with numbers or math problems is the region of the brain that's associated with fear. And among students without math anxiety, the region of the brain that is the most active, the brightest part of the brain on the MRI is the region that's associated with problem solving. So somehow, and one of the things that happened is that in focusing energy around fear, the energy is not devoted towards problem solving that would then result in strong math performance. So the anxiety actually reduces math performance. And Dr. Menon, as well as a number of other researchers, would say that poor math performance does not necessarily result in math anxiety. It is actually possible for someone with math anxiety to be good at math, but typically those with math anxiety avoid higher level math courses and thus limit their career possibilities. Those with math anxiety, if it is not addressed properly, could continue to affect the person's math performance, and in the end, continue to persist. The condition of math anxiety would continue to persist. So on the next slide, we wanted to think a little bit about when does this math anxiety emerge. And the reality is there's still a lot of research to be done to determine how early this sort of these situations occur for individuals. And we do know that it does happen for some children very, very early on. Now, it turns out there has not been some conclusive research to demonstrate that biological factors exist for math anxiety. There's no specific identity in biology that say this is the marker for math anxiety. But what we do know is that there are certain conditions that foster math anxiety. Again, poor performance does not necessarily result in math anxiety, but since math anxiety takes brain power away from problem solving and concentrates the power, the energy in fear, math anxiety results in poor performance. So what are some of the conditions that create or encourage math anxiety? How does it develop? So a child's math ability does not necessarily result in anxiety, but the combination of other factors lead to the development of math anxiety. For now, we don't know enough about why this happens. What we do know is in young children, math foundations such as ability to count, the ability to manipulate two-dimensional or three-dimensional images mentally, to determine which numbers is bigger or smaller. These are the kinds of mathematical ideas that young children need to begin to master. When the child is not able to grasp them more quickly than others, these individuals are more susceptible to social cues. The research shows that it's not necessarily that these children who couldn't learn these concepts quickly, that it's not this fact that lead to math anxiety. It's a combination of this with the fact that there are social cues around them that encourages or develops this math anxiety. So social cues such as hearing an adult say, "I was never very good with math," that then lead the child to make the conclusion or make into their own the idea that they might perhaps not be very good in math, and that it's perhaps not a possibility for them to develop or learn or improve their skills. As for math strategies that require more working memory to solve problems, there again needs to be research to be done, but there is something that's kind of interesting around working memory, that math problems that require a lot of working memory for some students may be a challenge for the students who can handle high amount of working memory. This part is somewhat counterintuitive, these individuals may actually be more susceptible to math anxiety. For now, I'll leave it at that. There's actually more research to be done about working memory and why some of these children who have a higher amount of working memory seem to be more susceptible to math anxiety. one would think that with more working memory that they would be able to handle higher problems with more tasks that they have to manage in their brain. But that's something that we'll have to do a little more research on. That for now it's counterintuitive. Now, what I wanted to do is to focus on social influences, the social cues that children receive from the environment around them. Individuals often influence the child's life, including their parents, teacher, and peers. Parents often inadvertently say things like things that reinforce or introduce math anxiety or simply math ability or competence. Other children can reinforce or support either math confidence or math anxiety. What's really interesting is the work of Dr. Sion Beilock at the University of Chicago. She published a study in 2010 where she examined the math anxiety levels of elementary school teachers. And then she also looked at the anxiety levels of the students in their class. She compared the anxiety levels of the students at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. And what she found was that among the children whose teachers had higher levels of math anxiety, by the end of the school year, those students increased their anxiety, whereas the teachers whose math anxiety is relatively low or non-existent, the students' math anxiety level remained relatively the same. So her study was seminal in demonstrating how important it is for that the impact of teachers have on the students, our children's confidence in math. And in fact, the 2010 study saw that girls were far more affected. She suggested that perhaps the girls tended to look towards women as role models, same gender, and the boys were not as affected, although the boys were not immune to the anxiety as well. And she, based on this research, she had said and encouraged School of Education to offer more math training, or at least the teaching of math, to strengthen or reduce math anxiety for the students that they teach. Now, this has already come up as I'm talking here, but the big issue around here is around is math anxiety a natural phenomenon, or is it something that we've fostered in our children? Is it nature or nurture? Did we nurture our children to be more math anxious? And here's one study that's kind of interesting, I thought. It came out just a few years ago, where they looked at babies as early as 4.5 months old. And they flashed white screens with dots on them. And these dots for several slides would have the same number of dots, perhaps arranged differently on the slide. And they would be flashed at different times. And the babies would then be observed to determine how long they focus their attention on the slide. And the study found that when the babies were shown dots of the same numbers arranged differently, they very quickly start to lose interest. The amount of time they spend looking at these dots, these slides, as they change positions, start to reduce or stay relatively short. And then when a slide with different number of dots suddenly the baby spends just a few seconds more, a split second more than slides that have same number of dots. So at least with some preliminary findings, the suggestion is perhaps even babies have some number sense, some idea of size and difference. There still need to be, more study. So again, then going back to the question, is math anxiety biological or learned? Research by Carol Dweck and others, instead of asking the specific question of whether it's biological or learned, looked more at the consequence of believing in whether intelligence is biological or it is learned, whether math ability is learned and inherited from the parents, or whether it's something that a child, the student, can learn as they engage with others around them. Carol Dweck wrote a book titled The Mindset in 2008, where she defines and discusses the effects of fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Fixed mindset is where Dweck defines it as the individuals who believe that intelligence is fixed. The intelligence is what they're born with. And growth mindset occurs in individuals who believe that with hard work and persistence and experience, learning can occur. And so she has found, and she has replicated this study a number of times. In one study, she divided the participants into 3 groups, and these were middle school students that she gave she conducted this study. Each group was given a math problem to do, and with each group, she praised them differently. So we're looking at the external influence on the participants. So for the first group, she praised them for their speed and suggested that perhaps they were able to complete the problem quickly was due to the fact that they were gifted, they were very intelligent, they were naturally gifted in performing the math problem. For a second group, rather than praising them for their speed, she spoke to them about how she praised them for their persistence, their hard work, and discussed strategies that they used to solve the problem. And then for the control group, the last group, she simply said, "Good job. Thank you for participating." And then she went back to each of the groups and she asked, if we were to give you another problem, would you want an equally similar problem, an equally easy problem, or would you like to try a harder problem? And it turns out that with group 1, the group who were praised for speed and naturally gifted, tended to want to have problems that were equally easy. And so this is demonstrating that they simply want to try similar problems, and as opposed to the second group, when they were asked easy or the same problem or harder, they were far more interested in trying a more challenging problem. And it turns out we find that it's in learning, it's in experiencing more challenging problems and new problems that learning occurs. And that the growth mindset person, an easy problem, a problem that they can solve very quickly, is not interesting. It is actually boring. A difficult, challenging problem is more interesting, and this is where learning occurs. The fixed mindset individuals tend not to want challenging problems. They want similar problems that they already know how to solve, and this is where they can continue to show others that they still have the intelligence to perform math. If they were to try a harder problem and they were not successful in a short amount of time, it seemed to prove to themselves as well as others that perhaps they're not naturally gifted. The result is that this is where they start to wonder, question their math ability, and anxiety certainly will develop from there. So what can educators do? One is to boost children's math skills. And then the other is to talk about, to teach students through activities and explorations, to talk to children about how the world can be represented in different ways. The world can be represented in numbers, in math, and so on and so forth. And then these two are often applied one at the exclusion of another. We either spend a lot of time with practice problems, or we spend a lot of time in activity and exploration and not enough on practice problems. The reality is that we really need to have a good balance between the two, between practice and activity and exploration. Skills practice leave the child feeling bored and with little understanding of the math applications. But the activities in the exploration done exclusively without practice leave the child feeling a lack of confidence in recalling how to do the problem, and feeling that it takes them a long time to solve. Because they don't remember how they solved it last time, they have to go through that exploration again. And then the next time they see that problem, they may recall seeing that problem, but gee, they don't quite remember how to do it, so then they have to go through that exploration again, and that can be frustrating. So we need to balance between competence and speed and problems and basic skills and the exploration and developing an understanding, a deeper understanding of numbers as applied to the world around us. Since individuals with math anxiety can still be good at math, our job as teachers is to find ways to help children strengthen their basic math skills through games, visual, auditory, and tactile representations, repetition, recitation, etc. Finding ways to talk to children about how the world can be represented in numbers, help them to develop their understanding. Ways including the number of steps from the classroom door to the bathroom, the number of trees, the number of steps moving backwards or forward, 3 books, 3 chairs, 3 dolls, 3 animals, 3 dogs. And in these cases, the number 3 appears, and helping them to develop an abstraction of the number 3 that's separate from the items, books, chairs, dolls, animals, dogs, and so on. And then Sion Bylock, in her 2010 study, was able to find that what's most effective at reducing math anxiety among students is to actually teach teachers how to teach math. And that is different from teaching teachers about mathematics itself. So learning about how to teach math will allow us to be more effective at keeping math anxiety at bay or at a minimum in our own classrooms. So another way that help us to reduce or minimize math anxiety is to try to avoid giving timed tests. As we talked about with Dweck, one of the things that we often do and result in fostering fixed mindset is insisting that the child calculate and make computations very quickly. At some point, we want them to be able to do some of that more quickly. And that's where practice and skills come into play. But constantly giving time tests is not really the most effective way to build math intelligence. Speed and accuracy, and in fact, speed and accuracy in numerical calculations are necessary only in certain professions, such as accounting and banking. And in many other math and science fields, mathematics don't really require speed as much as simply understanding how math and numbers are applied in the real world. So it's much more valuable for us to spend time working with our children to understand how math is used and applied. And so we have to have that balance between speed without using time to test, or at least using math games, computer games, where there is a time component, but because it's a game, the test component is left out, and it's not so high pressure. For older children and for adults, a very effective strategy to reduce math anxiety is to take a moment, about 5 minutes before a test or before an activity, a math activity, to write about how they feel about the math and about how they feel about the material that they're going to be tested, as well as write about what they have done to prepare for the test. Bylock found that in this writing exercise, it helps the person release some of their anxiety and fears about the impending test. And in doing so, their brain energy can now be focused more on problem solving, so that the problem solving part of their brain becomes more active, and thereby result in more successful math performance. As we suggested in fixed mindset versus growth mindset, how we talk about children shape the way they see their ability to learn. If we tell them that they must be gifted because they solve a problem quickly, we have encouraged them to believe in fixed mindset, that intelligence is innate, and because it's innate, it cannot be changed much. When we focus our praises on methods they used to solve a problem, we help point out effective strategies, effective learning strategies, effective problem-solving strategies. We encourage persistence and hard work, and we encourage children to seek greater challenges where he or she will learn and grow more. Finally, we all heard that we should celebrate failure. This is particularly important as we try to create a learning environment that minimizes or reduces math anxiety. It is in making mistakes that children learn, but we must allow children to discuss with us and with each other about how they arrive at the erroneous conclusions to strengthen their problem-solving skills. Exploring errors also help children see different ways to arrive at the answer. There is not always one right way to get the answer. And sometimes, the reality is sometimes in math, there could be more than one way, more than one answer, depending on how we ask the question. So we can ask questions that are more open-ended, and there are actually ways to ask math questions that are more open-ended and lead to greater, more interesting discussions and ideas on how to solve the problem. And I just want to point out that just very recently there was an article that was published online by Eduardo Brusino that speaks about the subtleties of celebrating failure. There are a number of different ways to look at this, and there are different failures that would solicit different responses, and I can share that with everyone in just a moment. Actually, I just came across that link this morning, so I will share that in a moment. Let's see, next slide. So here's some resources I wanted to share. I mentioned already the Mindset by Carol Dweck. It's a great book, fast read, on ways that we that fixed mindset, growth mindset appears for us, as well as in our students, and some ways that we can address them. Jo Boaler, I have not talked about, but she wrote a great book on what's math got to do with it, and she talks about how that's one book that where she's talked about how to teach math and what are some of the myths around math concepts, and so it's a great book to look at. I mentioned Sion Beilock quite a bit, and you'll see that her name is spelled very differently from the way it is pronounced. Dr. Beilock wrote the book titled Choke, and that book is actually focused on the more gifted students, the students who seem to do really well, and all of a sudden they choke when things really matter. Perhaps they won many competitions, or in a competition they are expected to be the favorite to win that competition, but somehow in the final round they choke, they perform very poorly. And it has a lot to do with their mindset, their fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Although in Choke she doesn't use those terms, but she certainly refers to them in other ways. And finally, the two remaining books here, Games for Math and Math in the Garden, are applications, books that you may find valuable in looking for ways to teach math. Peggy Kay's Games for Math is a great book for K through third grade, although some of the material she writes may shed some light in early math, very early math. She offers wonderful perspective on where children often experience conceptual difficulties in math. And recommend activities, games to help develop greater understanding in those concepts. And sometimes we as educators are so focused on, and we know, for instance, that the number 3 looks a certain way, and so we so focus on relating the 3 items to the abstract representation of the number 3, but Peggy Kay would go into some details about how the student behaves and react towards you as you present the concept, would shed some light in where the misunderstanding occurs, and the kind of activity you can do with the child, the student, to help overcome the misconception. And then I wanted to point out some great software and apps. There are so many wonderful technology out there that we ought to mention. Khan's Academy is a wonderful piece. It's free. Anyone with web and access and computer access can get to it. You simply need to create a free ID and password, free account, and you can view videos online as many times, as often as you want, 24/7, 360 days a year. And along with each of the video clips are some practice problems. And the way it works is the student could practice the problems as often and as many times as they want. If they are successful in solving a particular type of problem 3 times in a row, they then can advance to the next level. If they miss 1 out of the 3, then they have to start all over again and again be successful at solving the type of problem 3 times consecutively. And then practically everyone has a smartphone or a tablet. So I'd have to mention a number of apps. Math Training for Kids, Peter Pig's Money Coin Counter. That's a great app that helps young children learn how to count coins. Math versus Zombies is one that is that builds skills, math skills, addition, subtraction skills, for instance. And the way that works is it has these zombies coming towards you, the living dead coming towards you, and the user has to enter the correct answer displayed on the zombie shirt to destroy the zombie that's coming towards you. Dragon Box is now a very popular app. It costs about $5 for the Dragon Box 5 Plus, ages 5 plus, 12 plus, and Elements, which is a geometry-based app. The 5 Plus and the 12 Plus are introductions to algebra. There are no numbers in these, but in Dragon Box, it teaches children's basic concepts to algebra, basic concepts to geometry. And it's $5, but it really is $5 worth spending. It really helps children to be introduced to basic ideas of triangles, angles, sides, and triangles with 2 equal sides, 3 equal sides, and so on and so forth, and in a very fun way. And then the rest of the apps listed here are some apps for us to practice our math skills. Invariably, when we ourselves don't use our math skills, we lose it. And to maintain it and to strengthen our cognitive functions, we do have to periodically do some math. And the alarm clock extreme free, excuse me, I have to cough. The alarm clock extreme is one that I sometimes use to activate the snooze button on the alarm clock, or to activate to actually turn the alarm off, you have to solve some math problems. And these are, and you can actually set the settings for relatively easy math problems, somewhat difficult math problems, or more complicated math problems. And these are mostly addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division problems, single digits, 2 or 3 digits at times. And then Sudoku, Kakuro, and Kenken are math puzzles that use addition, subtraction, and some logic. And that's it. Thank you for listening in. At this time, if there are any questions, I'm willing to take a moment to answer.
Yeah. Thanks, Gloria. So if you have any questions, just enter your questions into the question box within your control panel. And we actually have a question regarding time tests. So Ryan noted that the M-class testing that many of us are required to do are timed. I agree that timed tests are not the most effective way to build math intelligence, but I don't know how to reconcile that with the realities of timed tests we are mandated to do.
So I think part of what we can do is use those math softwares, if it's possible to allow the students to practice math problems on these math games and apps. They are actually timed, but they don't know that they're timed. And so when they do that, the students are actually building skills, their basic skills, and then when it comes time for them to solve a certain number of problems in a limited amount of time, it won't be they won't have developed an anxiety over needing to solve so many questions. They will have already built the skills to be able to do that. So I would suggest not necessarily giving them lots of time tests to see how quickly they can solve now, how many problems they can solve now in 1 minute, but giving them a lot of practice problems to be able to build that proficiency, and then when time comes to be able to that they have that timed test, but at that point it will be irrelevant. The timed component will be irrelevant.
We have another question from Antoinette. She says, how do you help students know the steps of problems, but often forget the steps? So if students may know it, but you may go over the steps with them, but they tend to forget the steps a lot to solving problems.
So that actually gets to the kind of mistakes that students tend to use, and this was the work of Eduardo Bursino. And if you actually, let me see if I can get the link. I'm going to post the link. I just posted the link. I submitted the link to chat. I don't know if we can get to that. But Eduardo Bursino is spelled Briceno, and the article is titled "Mistakes Are Not All Created Equally." And so he goes through some details about essentially 4 different types of mistakes. There's the aha moment mistake. There are the mistakes where it's what he calls the stretch mistakes, the kind of mistake that I'm hearing where we've taught the student the different steps, but they seem to forget. It may be a sloppy mistake, or perhaps there is something that they still didn't quite understand conceptually what's going on, and so needing to go back to that conceptual framework. And in understanding what type of mistake the student is making, we would have to then respond in the way that would most be more effective. I didn't get into that in this talk, but Eduardo Bursino's article on mistakes would actually goes in quite a bit of detail on how to address these.
For that. And then we have another question. So what are some examples of open-ended math questions?
So one of the things we might often do is if we say, well, let me see, we have let's say Jack has 3 apples and Mary has 2 pears. How many fruits do they have? And so there is one exact way of doing it. We might draw some pictures of fruits and have them count the number of fruits. But perhaps an open-ended one would be just having many different maybe Jack with 3 apples, Mary has 2 pears, and then a number of different things, and then simply asking the students to come up with their own questions. Given that we have these things, what kind of questions would you want to ask? And perhaps the child might say, well, why do we all have so many fruits? And that's not a math question, but that's okay. And so then we could prompt them to say, well, what happens if we say, how many orange colored fruits are there? And then having students ask, think about that for a moment, and then asking them to think about other possible questions, and then coming up with other possible questions, thinking about how might they solve that a different type of question, and what would they have to do to solve that different kind of question.
Mm-hmm. Great. And I think this will be our last question. So for educators who realize that they do have some math anxiety, what can we do now in our classrooms to make sure we don't transfer math anxiety to our students?
That's a great question. Math anxiety, actually, what I find it really fascinating is that we can have math anxiety and still be good at math. And to me, that's actually very liberating to hear. It's okay to have math anxiety. It's what we do with that that matters. And some degree of anxiety is good for us because that means we are actually primed to want to work harder or to figure out different things. So what we want to do is to think about, go back to strategies. Think about strategies. Think about problems where we are comfortable solving, and think about what we have done there, and then try to transfer it to problems where we find ourselves with some degree of discomfort, and then to demonstrate that it's okay to be uncomfortable with something that we don't know, and that's really modeling a good behavior of what to do when we are uncomfortable, and then when we have that anxiety and focusing on strategies to teach that mathematics. So learning about what is it about this concept that is difficult, and if the student is having difficulties, what is it what is the foundation, what is the basis that is making them have this difficulty? Is it conceptual? Is it that there are so many steps that they're having difficulties following through? Do they need pictures more? Do they need drawings? Do they need other kinds of pictures? And oftentimes having conversations with other teachers to talk about how we do teach the concept. And also what I find valuable is asking the students to talk about their mistakes, and that piece. Even if we are not very comfortable with it, we can talk about. Well, so I don't know how to do this. What do you think? What would you do? And what do we know? What don't we know? And what kinds of things have you noticed? What do I notice? Are these things that we notice meaningful? Are these going to help? Maybe it won't. And actually, sometimes it's okay that we can't solve the problem today. Sometimes we put it aside, maybe make a note of it on the side of the board, put it next to us, put it on a note somewhere to remind us this is something that we don't know how to solve yet, and we do other things and then come back. And sometimes as we're doing other things, all of a sudden it comes to us. Sometimes after a good nap or after a good night's rest, we come back to it and go, oh, wait a minute, I know how to solve it now. And so it's okay not to know how to answer the question right this moment, very quickly, in the split second. It's okay to explore. It's okay to be confused.
Thanks, Gloria. So thank you, everybody. We're going to have to wrap up at this point, but in terms of what's next after this webinar, so if you guys have additional questions, feel free to reach out directly to Gloria. It's Gloria L, it's not an I, it's an L, at oakton.edu. If you would like a certificate or some type of verification for professional development credit hours, please feel free to reach out to me at kelly@honeybeeco.com to receive that certification. And then if you missed something or you can't remember what we covered, or you want to reference back to the topic, we will actually send out the webinar transcript and recording by the end of this week, so you can access it at any time. And I would just ask you guys to, if you enjoyed this one, save the date for next month's webinar. We're actually going to be talking about how to integrate engineering into early childhood settings. And so that should be a great topic, because engineering education is definitely a hot topic, and especially at the elementary level. So I want to thank everybody again for tuning in. And thank you, Gloria, for providing such a great perspective on a topic that has perplexed a lot of people for many generations. And it's great that you were able to share the research that you've uncovered on this topic.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks, everybody.